Welcome to Talking Mopars, episode number 164. This episode is a replay of the special edition Sunday Night Live that I recorded with my friend Jamie Passon of Passon Performance. And wouldn't you know it, this episode of Talking Mopars was brought to you by Passon Performance. When it comes to the A-833 4-speed in our beloved Mopars, Jamie is an expert. His company, Passon Performance, specializes in the A-833s, and we had a great conversation getting to know both Jamie and the A-833 a little better. So without further ado, let's get our shift together. If you are a Mopar enthusiast, then you are in the right place. Don't go anywhere. You're tuned into the best Mopar enthusiast-driven podcast on planet Earth, and I'm your host, Chris Albrecht, better known as the Mopar Hunter, and this is Talking Mopars.
You're listening to Talking Mopars with the Mopar Hunter, your direct connection to all things Mopar.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a special Sunday Night Live edition of the podcast. I have a special guest tonight. He is an expert in the infamous A-833 4-speed transmissions that we can find in our beloved Mopars. I'm excited about this podcast, and Jamie Passon of Passon Performance is helping me get to Las Vegas with the Roadrunner. I have been looking for somebody to help me with this transmission because my car's a 4-speed car, and Jamie came to my rescue. So we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. We're going to find out how Jamie got into Mopars and how he started Passon Performance. And then we're going to get into some Q&A to close out the show. So if you have questions, feel free to post them in the comments or wait until I announce that it's time for the Q&A part of the show. We're going to learn some stuff about 4-speeds because I'm an idiot when it comes to them. So this will be great to have an expert on the show. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my daughter in the background. Just blows up the show. Hi, sweetheart. You know I'm live on the podcast right now, right? Come here for a second.
Hi.
Wow, this is the first time. This is the first time you've done this to Daddy. Wave, say hi, everybody. Say Mopar or no car.
No car.
Well, it's Mopar or no car, but that's okay. Sweetie, Daddy will be out in a little bit. Okay, can you go see Mommy and shut the door?
I love you.
Huh?
I love you.
I love you too. You want to give Daddy a big hug? Okay. Can you go see Mommy, please? Wow, that is the first time that has ever happened. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring Jamie on the show. I guess my daughter is going to be joining us in the background. Jamie, what's up, brother?
Nothing much. How are you?
I guess we have two special guests tonight.
Yeah.
she can just hang out back there. You never know what's going to happen here on Talking Mopars. And my wife to the rescue.
It's like a horror movie. The door creeps open and
Yeah.
Oh, well, she got her.
Bye.
Uh-oh.
Oh God. Oh man.
Now you're on the list, buddy.
Oh gosh. What a surprise. And now she's upset, but that's okay. Jamie, thank you for coming on the show. Welcome to Talking Mopars.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, how's it going, buddy?
All right, we're busy, but I appreciate the opportunity to sit down and chew the fat with you.
Absolutely, man. Like I said earlier, admittedly, I'm an idiot when it comes to 4-speeds. This is my first 4-speed car. So like I'm learning as I go. And I was really, I don't want to say scared, but because I'm under pressure to get my car done by March for Muscle Cars at the Strip, I was really nervous about rebuilding my first 833 because I was thinking, if I screw this up, and I put it in the car and something goes wrong and I have to pull it back out before the event, I'm going to feel not only like a horse's ass, but I'm going to go, wow, I shouldn't have done it under pressure. I would much rather have no pressure and just build my first transmission on my own time,
right,
with no pressure. So thanks for coming to my rescue. I appreciate that. But let's get into who you are and how you got started into Mopars. It's clear by your background that you're a Mopar guy through and through. I highly doubt we'll find a Chevy in your garage.
No.
So how'd you get
friends
started?
have Chevys, but
Yeah. we don't talk about those on Talking Mopars. So how'd you get started, man?
Well, grew up, was kind of always a Mopar family. My dad had what I remember was he had a 71 Fury 3, then he had a 74 Valiant, and, and then after that, it kind of dwindled to the more economical foreign car deal. But,
yeah,
I can remember sitting, helping my dad do brakes on his Fury and Valiant, and, laying under the car, tapping on the 8 3/4 rear with a gasket hammer and, stuff like that. So I would say he was probably the most influential as far as, getting me into cars. And it was mainly because it was a necessity. Back then you fixed your own stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I remember watching him rebuild wheel cylinders in the driveway, with the drill with the brake hone. And, so it was, and then, as I approached driving age, there really wasn't a question. I wanted a Chrysler product. So I started nosing around, and God, we went to Jersey a couple times, all over, the surrounding states, and I just could not find, I was looking for more something that was ready to go. I wasn't in a position to have a project car when I was 16,
Yeah.
And I had saved some money up, and there was a cruise down in Allentown area that my dad and my brother had gone to. I couldn't go for some reason. And there was a guy selling a 72 Barracuda there.
Okay.
And they just my dad took a couple pictures of it back in the day when it was actually a camera film.
Yeah.
And the guy had 3x5 index cards that said 72 CUDA 6000. So he brought one home and just stuffed it there. Finally, when he developed the pictures, I like, So we ended up calling the guy, went to look at the car, and brought the car home. And fortunately, I still have it. It's a nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've had the car since you were 16.
Yep. And there's, I guess, like 55,000 miles on it only.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. You hear so many stories about the guys that get their first car, they love it, and then they let it go and they wish they hadn't.
Yeah.
You got your car.
Yeah. I wouldn't sell that. But prior to when I was 16, my dad he ordered in 64, a 65 Plymouth Satellite 426 wedge 4-speed car.
Oh,
he
cool.
ordered it and kept the car. And I remember when I was a kid riding a tricycle around the car in the dirt floor garage behind my grandparents' house.
Wow.
And he parked it. My brother came home from the hospital in it in 71, and he parked it, and he only took it out to get it inspected till 78, and then it sat from 78 till 90. And my brother actually got the idea we should get it cleaned up for his 50th birthday.
Oh, cool.
Which we did. We were able to get it cleaned up, running, and so it's it's a nice, clean, original car. There's 19,000 miles on it still.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
That sits on the top lift, and my Dart is underneath that, and my Barracuda is above my wife's Belvedere. So
okay, so let's get it. Let me ask you. Tell me about your collection. How many Mopars do you have? What do you got?
Oh God.
I love this question because everybody usually starts with, "Oh man."
65 Satellite, my dad's car.
Okay.
My wife always wanted a wagon, so we picked up a 65 Belvedere wagon. She has her 67 Belvedere too that her and her brother had built back before I met her. 68 Dart, 67 Dart, 78 Power Wagon, 70 Power Wagon, and then I have an 01 Cummins truck, and then a 2012 Cummins truck. Both sticks because they have to be sticks. And everything, now that I'm thinking, well, the Belvedere wagon is a 3 in a tree.
Okay.
The 68 Dart, that's going to be a stick car. That's a project car. I'm going to do a Hemi clone out of that.
Nice.
And the 67 Dart is a console automatic, but I think we're saving that for our daughter. So, excuse me.
Awesome.
So we'll see if she wants a stick or not. We'll go for that at that point.
I mean, so, how can Jamie Passon be your dad and you not want a stick? You know what I mean? So the 72 Barracuda, that's got a 4-speed in it, or?
Yeah, it was an automatic car.
Okay.
And then we have 2 more. I didn't get to them.
Oh, okay.
I have a Durango RT, and then my wife has a 19 SRT Grand Cherokee with a Pro Charger on it. So,
oh, nice. I bet that scoots.
Oof. Yeah. Oof, that is, because it just plants and goes.
Yeah. That's okay to have an automatic in it. It's all right.
Yeah.
Same with the Durango. My wife's got a Durango RT, and it moves quite nicely.
I was surprised. It's, it was surprisingly quick.
Yeah.
But nothing like the Jeep, but
no.
So.
Those SRT Jeeps are bananas. Even factory, it's like I didn't realize an SUV could be this fun.
Yeah. And then when we put the Pro Charger on it, it was like, holy crap. So.
Wow. So how on earth did you get into the 4-speed business?
For my 70 Dart drag car, actually, I left that out of the list. I have a 70 Dart drag car.
There's always one that gets forgotten.
I lose track of them. I haven't raced it in a couple of years because we had a motor. It didn't fail, but it needed a refresh, and so that's done now. But I have to get back to the car and finish it. So I had built that car with a 383 in it, first big block A body around this area back in 92. And Maple Grove Raceway used to have what was called King of the Street Nationals. So I took the car there, and I could not power shift second gear. It just kept bending the shifter rod. So took it home, and driving it normal on the street, it was fine. Just, if you held your foot to the floor, it would not shift at high RPM. So picked up another 4-speed, bought parts, rebuilt that, and admittedly, like you, that was the first transit I ever was going to do, and I'm freaking out, man. Right. So, back then, I mean, where did you go for parts? There wasn't, some of Jags didn't have stuff like that, So I nosed around and I found a company called McCandless Performance. Herb McCandless, legendary Sox and Martin driver. So,
Mr. 4-speed.
Yep. So I remember I called there on a Friday afternoon. It was like 4:45, and his wife Marie answered, which she usually did. And, I said I needed a rebuild kit. And she starts asking me questions, and I'm like, I don't know. So she says, hold on, Herb, you pick up line 2. And he gets on the phone, and I didn't know the guy. So I guess he could tell I was a youngin'.
Yeah.
So he starts asking me questions, and we fumbled through to give him the information he needed. And he goes, I'll tell you what, if you have a problem rebuilding that, you call me, I'll walk you through it. I'll stay on the phone and walk you through it. So I was like, holy crap.
Wow.
And I didn't end up doing that, but it was just, it was really, really cool, And then admittedly, I hadn't really talked to him for a number of years then.
Yeah.
And then I started business. So, well, I'm skipping ahead. Anyway, so I build the car, or the trans for the car. I go to switch the trans out and it won't go in. What ended up happening was pilot bushing walked out of the back of the crank. This was back before they had the roller bearings and stuff to fit the automatic cranks. Okay. Napa used to make an undersized pilot bushing. So the problem there is in an automatic crank, the crank is not held to really a good tolerance in that area because nothing was going to go in there. So you just kind of left it fly with the pilot bushing from Napa. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. So what happened was the pilot bushing walked out of the crank and it was on the input shaft. And then it got stuck in the clutch splines when I pulled the old trans out. I fixed all of that and I stuck the trans back in that was in the car, shifted perfect. So I had a fresh trans there, So I took it to the next Maple Grove flea market and I sold it in like 5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So then I was like, So I bought a few more, rebuilt them over the winter, and then sold them again, right away. And I had talked to a local guy down Harrisburg area, Henry Fox is his name. And he like subletted me like 8x8 of his Carlisle spot. So I just backed my pickup in and set up a card table and just started selling some trinketry stuff. And I bought all the parts and cores I could buy at Carlisle, which was probably about 3 or 4 at that point. And, now we come home with 50 or 60 from a show,
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
And so it just snowballed, and started making our own stuff. And, but I hadn't, as I sort of say then, I didn't really talk to Herb for years, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And then he walks up to me at Carlisle the one year, because when we put our display out, we always have, 6 or 8 4-speeds freshly built lined up in the front, and it looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
And he was walking by, and he stops, and he's like, "What do we got going on here?" And and he actually remembered me.
Wow.
He actually remembered me. So then that sparked a long time. I mean, we're like really good friends, my wife and I will go down there, for the weekend, and they're really good people. And it meant the world to me that he actually remembered me. I mean, how many people does he deal with,
Yeah, no.
So
that's crazy. Wow.
His 2 boys, his wife, Marie, passed away a few years ago from cancer, but, him and his boys are very involved, and it's they have the museum down there now and stuff, and it's a good group of people. So
for sure,
so having his endorsement it means a lot to us, and I'm very thankful for it.
Yeah, absolutely, a legend in the world of Mopar, an absolute legend. Every time, I just got finished watching his documentary on YouTube. Very, very interesting story that guy has. And every time I see clips of him at seminars and things, he just seems like a really down-to-earth, cool guy,
very
willing to help. That's
the thing.
That's awesome.
He's willing to help. I've seen him give his card out. I mean, he's retired.
Yeah,
I've seen him give his card out at Carlisle to anybody that walks up and asks him a question. It's his house number. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's just, it's funny. Like his golf cart he rides down to his shop, and it's crazy. You walk around in that place, and it's just like, Jesus, man.
Yeah.
It's really pretty neat.
So let's rewind a little bit. How did you get into drag racing? So you had your 72 Barracuda. How long before you're 16, you get the Barracuda for your first car?
Yeah.
How long before you're like, you know what, I'm going to start getting crazy and racing these things?
I never raced my Barracuda ever.
Okay.
I bought my Dart in 92, so I would have been 17.
Okay.
And I just drove it on a street, and a guy that I got to know, a friend of mine, Scott, we were talking, and he said, let's take it to New Media, which is another track close to us, one day. And I remember, man, I was so afraid to tell my dad, because my dad wasn't like a car guy that I knew, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, he had the Belvedere or the Satellite, but he parked it years ago, and we had just gotten it out, you know what I mean? So I was so nervous to tell him. We found a set of Kragers, small bolt Kragers, because it was a 340 car.
Yeah.
I had originally a 340 car, small bolt pattern axles and everything. My buddy Scott found a set of small bolt Kragers, a set of used slicks. We threw them in the trunk with a jack and a 4-way, and we just went. And man, that was it. I came home from that Sunday afternoon, and it was done. It was just And then I just continued to upgrade the car, and
awesome.
quicker and quicker and quicker. And I mean, when I first ran it, I think it ran like a 15. 10, because it was a stock. It was a Newport 383 with. I put a mild cam in it. It still had the stock heads. I had an aluminum intake, but it was pretty tame.
So you got it as a 340 car, and you put the 383 big block in it?
No, it was a 340 car. It came with a 273.
Oh, okay.
I bought it from a good friend of mine, Rob Leggett. He only actually lives about 5 miles from me now, and he sold it to me for $1,000. But I had to give him the motor back, which was fine because it was an anemic 273. So so that's when I decided I was going to put a big block in the car, and
cool.
Eventually the 383 ended up a 440, and then I had stage 4 max wedge heads for it, and which I bought used from another racer, which I got to know well, and just went from there. So
right on. So you still race it every once in a while, or you retired it?
It's not retired, but we just freshened the motor up last year. So honestly, I have to get headers built for it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm waiting on. But we've been so busy with moving and just catching up on everything. And 11 tractor trailer loads is a lot of stuff to move.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we have. Oh my God, do we have stuff?
Wow.
So,
That's
yeah. I'll die here, man. I'm not doing that again. I'm not doing that again.
How far away did you move from your original place? You get a big shop or something?
It's same square footage. It's just it's laid out. We actually have a nice like 27 by 50 heated, cooled garage for the cars now. You know, because they were in the shop before. So and then we have two 40 by 60 shops now, which I'm gonna join them, so make one big one. But yeah, we have a lot of stuff. So a lot of pallet and a lot of
11 truckloads. Yeah, that's a lot. I was wondering how big the new shop was, because I was like, 11 truckloads. I'm trying to think, because I used to drive semis, so I'm thinking 11 tractor trailers is a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's an obscene amount of crap, man. So,
all right, let's fast forward again to.
So that's pretty much.
You're at these swap meets, and you start selling 4-speeds that you're rebuilding. How does that turn in? I imagine I imagine it started off small. When did you go, okay, I need to turn this into a business?
When I got afraid of the tax man.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's, I started making not a ton of money, man, but, I probably made 10 grand, and I was like, it's so yeah, that's when I decided to, I wasn't worried about liability at that point, but then I decided, I probably need to do something here, and just decided to go, official. And so we've been in business I've been doing it since 99.
Okay.
But, officially since like 03.
Okay.
So
yeah, not
it's that long.
Not too many players in that game, I'll tell you that.
No, it's a pretty short list of people that do this.
When it comes to building cars, I don't know why, but every time I think about a transmission, I'm like, man, that's too many moving parts for me. Too much of an idiot.
That's what I think about an automatic. Like, the 4-speed is tangible. I can look at a gear and say, that's why it's popping out. An automatic, I don't know why it won't shift.
Yeah.
So.
Do you ever get people asking you questions about automatics?
Occasionally, I'll get somebody that'll call it that will want an automatic. I don't even let them get to the question part, because I don't know what I'm doing with them. But they'll want an automatic, and it's like, call these people. So.
Crazy. I have a lot of listeners from overseas, Australia, Europe. Do you guys get a lot of orders from customers on the across the pond?
We do, actually. We get some from like Japan, not a ton, but we do have some from over there. Australia, it comes in waves. It's kind of, we'll get 4 or 5 in a month, and then we won't hear much from down there for, you can definitely tell when the weather is, when it's summer here is we do way more business in Australia, because that's their time to work on their stuff, because it's winter. Europe, we get quite a bit of business. We actually have, I have a distributor in Sweden, Joel Skoglund. He has a shop over there, Sawmill Garage, and he handles a lot of our, the Sweden area, Switzerland, Finland, all of that area.
Yeah.
Cool guy, became a real good friend. He actually shipped his Dart over here. We did drag week with it. In 2019, he has a 68 Dart with a NASCAR motor in it.
So tell me about this story. He shipped the car here for drag week.
Yeah, he built the car. I mean, it's a cool car. It's made to look like a 68 Hemi Dart,
Yeah.
And he built it, drove it from his garage to his house 1.5 miles, and they loaded it on a truck and took it to the port and shipped it over. And we went down. Well, it was my girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife, but we took her brother's rollback down to Newark, and oh my God, man. We walk into this warehouse, and it's like there's all of these cars. There must have been 150 motorcycles sitting in there and just dusty, like they've been there and never got picked up or something. We walk in, and the car is jammed in the corner, and they can't drive the car. Like, it took us like an hour to jockey the car out, and I'm driving it down a ramp. It was sketchy as hell.
Oh, man.
And he probably, when he sees us, he doesn't know any of that. So, yeah, we brought it home, and he flew over. Him and his uncle actually flew over probably a week before drag week, and just did some finishing touches and got everything together, and we went down and ran it, and I'll tell you what, 1,000 miles, the car, nothing broke. The only thing that broke was a Zeus fastener on the trunk lid, and that was because we had to keep pulling it off to put fuel in it. The car got like 14 miles to the gallon on the street. Yeah. Wow.
With a NASCAR engine in it.
Yep. Yeah, and you just backed the timing off a little bit, and it was great. It was an awesome experience. I'd love to do it again. And yeah, I mean, we did great. We finished 4th, 5th, but I'm going to tell you what, man.
Wow.
For what he had in the car, money wise, you're up against guys that have $400,000 or $500,000 in cars.
Sure. Yeah.
And we got screwed because we had to be in the unlimited class because they moved the firewall. They moved the firewall back in the car.
Oh, okay.
Like 6 inches. So that screwed us. So, so we were against the big guns, and I'll tell you what, we did fantastic.
Yeah.
The one guy blew a turbo. He had one flown over, cost him like $10,000. Like, it was insane. It was like a Cinderella story. It was crazy, Wow. So, funny thing here. So he builds this car, and the windows don't roll down. They're fixed Lexan windows.
Okay.
So we're in like Southern PA, Maryland, Virginia, and it is hot as hell. Like, it was 100 degrees a couple days. So we're driving this bitch through traffic.
Oh God.
Like rush hour traffic with the car, sweating our ass off. I put 2 fans on the roll bar. The old school bus fans, remember the ones that were on the dash?
Yeah.
I put 2 of them on the roll bar, and it was just like a convection oven. They didn't do shit. They just blew hot air
man.
Because sheet metal floor and it was crazy. Oh my God, we're riding with the doors open. It was insane. But I mean, it was awesome. Like, it was an experience. It was just, and the fact that hats off to him, man. He built a kick-ass car. It didn't break. And we had an awesome time, and we did very formidable for 2 guys never doing anything in such a limited amount of time on a car, so, but I got to know him. We sent a lot of parts over there. He handles a lot of our European stuff, and
right on.
He's a good guy. He's a guy that I would trust to build a trans, so he knows his stuff. So
cool. So he's the guy that'll get parts from you and build them for guys over there.
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
He's always busy too. It's crazy how much work. So if you're over there and you need work done, if you can't find him, get a hold of me and I'll direct you.
Awesome. So for all my European listeners, reach out to him. What, Sawmill Garage? Is that what it was?
Sawmill Garage. Yeah.
Sawmill Garage.
His shop is an old sawmill.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Stuff's different over there. It's like they definitely repurpose buildings, man. It's like on the edge of this old growth pine forest. It's funny.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Pretty neat.
So I imagine he's got a 4-speed in that thing, in that Dart that he brought over.
Yeah.
The car, I'm familiar with it. I don't know everything about it, but the name stands out. What's the name of the car?
Swede 4-speed.
Swede 4-speed. That's awesome. So, I mean, that's you're taking an 833 on drag week with a NASCAR engine and beating the hell out of it. I guess that's a testament to how strong these transmissions are. Yeah,
so they are strong. Admittedly, that car did not have an 833 in it.
Oh, really?
No.
Well,
okay. Well, I'll explain. So, it came with an actual G-force in it that when he sent the car over, we took it apart, did some trickery to it, and you know, I will tell you this, and when you and I had spoke, you had said about capacities of the A-833.
Yeah.
I'm not going to kid anybody. The car at 875 horsepower, an A-833 will not handle that.
Yeah.
It won't. You know, and the only way actually a G-force handles it is because it's a controlled slip clutch.
Sure.
You know. So. Yeah.
That kind of leads. I was going to save this question for the Q&A, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it to you now. What are the limitations to these things? Let's start with the 23 spline. What are the limitations of a 23 spline?
I'm going to give you the canned answer here.
Okay.
It's very relative, and I'll explain it as good as I can, but it's relative. So take, for instance, you have a 70 Coronet.
Okay.
That's a heavy girl.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got 500 horsepower in a 70 Coronet with 355 gears.
Okay.
Or you have 500 horsepower in a 68 Dart with 355 gears.
Yeah.
It's going to survive in a Dart way longer than it's going to survive in the Coronet. Just you know, weight, ratio. You know, if you put 410 gears in a car, it's going to be, you know, it's going to have a lot more longevity. My rule of thumb is usually 550 horsepower with a 23 spline.
Okay.
You know, so, but again, you know, it you know, clutch comes into factor too.
Sure.
You know, if you have a dual disc clutch, sheesh, they're rough on parts. I mean, they hit hard.
Yeah.
And they are rough on parts. And that, as I said about that controlled slip, when we were on drag week, you know, when we left the track, we had to tighten the clutch up 6 turns on, you know, on all the fingers. So when you drive it on the street, it was tight.
Yeah.
When we'd get to the track, you know, we'd have to, take 6 turns out of it so that, you know, it would controlled slip so you didn't have the driveline shock and break the trans. So
interesting.
That setup can greatly increase the longevity. But as an example, like in my Dart, this would have been prior to the old engine had about 700 horsepower.
Okay.
Car weighed 30. Car's a heavy car. It's like 3,600 pound.
Oh, okay.
Dana 60 car. It's probably a little lighter now because I a lot more out of it. I'd say about 3,400 pound.
Okay.
700 horsepower, 3,400 pound, 456 gears. And before I had changed the motor, we were down at Cecil. And I mean, the car had lifted tires 3, 4, 5 inches.
Oh, okay.
But when I had pulled the motor out to freshen it, you know, I pulled the trans out and pulled it down, and cluster gear was cracked at third gear every tooth.
Wow.
So it was on borrowed time.
Yeah.
You know, so and that was a dual disc clutch in it. Okay.
Okay.
So if I had a controlled slip clutch, that probably wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
You know? So that's where, you know, clutch factors into things too.
Okay.
So there's really no cut and dried answer just because every car is different. It's just like, you know, people ask me all the time, well, what gear ratio should I put in the rear end?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's, you know, what cam do you have in it? Where's, you know, you don't want to be on the transition circuit of the carburetor. You know what I mean? You can just be dumping fuel down. You know what I mean? And you get worse mileage because you're lumbering along at 2,200 RPMs than if you were at, you know, 2,500. You know, so you can definitely overdrive a car. Yeah. You know, it's you know, everything is every car is different. So
interesting. Well, let me ask.
I would say, go ahead.
Let me ask you this then. You know, anytime I get into a conversation about 4-speeds with anybody, usually the 18 spline Hemi 4-speed gets brought up. It's almost like it's made of indestructible metals or something. So I'm curious, how much more are you getting as far as durability when you go from a 23 to an 18 spline?
You get considerably more. The gears are coarser. Okay. Material is the same, but we make a better material input shaft and third gear. Okay. So that adds considerable amount of strength, you know, to it. I would say, I mean, I have guys honestly running 700 and some horsepower through one. But again, what's the, so to be safe, I would say, your average car, probably 650. I would say it adds 100 horsepower capability to it.
Okay.
But, I have people running more than that through.
Yeah.
But it's something I just can't give a definite,
Sure.
it'll handle this,
Yeah. So if somebody brings you a factory, let's say, we'll just say for the sake of fun here, somebody brings you a factory 18 spline, they want you to rebuild it. What can you do to that transmission to make it as stout as possible? You said something about the third gear, you can make it stronger. Is there anything else you can do?
We can put a better material third in it.
Okay.
Input shafts on 18 splines rarely break.
Okay.
We can put a better input in it too. Steel forks is a good upgrade. And that's not horsepower related failure. It's just brass forks versus steel forks.
Okay.
So we can cryogenically treat the gears. That adds, oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't do it in-house. I send it out. But that adds, we can cryo the gears and shot peen them and micro polish them.
Oh, okay.
That definitely helps. So the less friction, the less heat, the less stress, not that these trannies run hot, but if you can get things smoother, it's just going to be a better situation. So between the better material gears and the cryogenically treating them, that'll get you 100 plus more horsepower.
Okay.
Third gear is generally the one that ever breaks. And a lot of times, we're constantly getting old, pro shift trannies in as cores and stuff like that. And, they used to do their burnout third gear back then so that they could get wheel speed, because you do it in first and you're tacked out before, I always do them in second just because I know the damage it does in third gear, because you start getting torque multiplication and it's really a lot of stress on the gear.
Okay.
But, a lot of them, I'd say 60% of them, the gears are cracked at third gear and the cluster too, because of that. So
is that the most common thing that you see with these transmissions?
Yeah.
Third gear?
Yeah, definitely third gear. 23 spline, I don't see a lot of broken 23 splines even. Sometimes if you have an extreme circumstance, you'll break it, but I don't see, it's not common. It really isn't. And maybe that was the luck of the draw that, they just weren't behind the higher horsepower stuff.
Yeah.
I can't, unless you know the history of every exact unit, but.
Sure.
But yeah, that's.
You said history. Let's talk a little bit about the history of the 4-speed. For a long time, Chrysler was running torque flights. And then it seems like their 4-speed, the A-833 came on, and it was like, finally they had some competition for the other guys. Right. So school me on some A-833 history.
Back in the day, the Muncie came out, I think, in Muncie 4-speed came out. GM guys, don't quote me. I want to say I might have been the late 50s, 58, 59, something like that.
I was going to say early 60s, but I think you're right.
I think it was in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken, but whatever. Yeah. So Chrysler didn't have a 4-speed.
Mm-hmm.
They used a strong 4-speed. They used to run a Borg-Warner T10.
Oh, okay.
Which was basically, if you lay a Borg-Warner T10 next to a Muncie, they're almost
same thing.
Identical. Reverses in the tail. It's a mid-plate trans, and they weren't stout. Small center distance between the cluster gear and the input. That's where you get your strength. The A-833 is a 3.5-inch center distance. That's the distance from the center of the crank or center of the cluster gear to the center of the input shaft. More distance, the stronger it is, because you got more material between the two points.
Okay.
I don't even know what a Muncie is or a T10, but it's a lot less. So, like early 60s, if you got a max wedge car, you couldn't even get a T10. You got a T85 3-speed. Which are made of unobtainium now, because it was a max wedge trans only, different bearing retainer, different input shaft, different gear ratios. It's like everybody ran a T85 back in the day in some capacity.
Yeah.
But the A8 or the Chrysler version was nothing else swaps that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But a counter shaft might swap, but ratios and everything are different. So they really needed a 4-speed, because it was hurting them, know. So they ended up purchasing new process gear in Syracuse, New York, and they took the plant over and developed the A-833, and that debuted in 64, and they ran that till like 86-ish in the trucks. It evolved into the overdrive 74, 75. But yeah, it was quite a good run, and there's several changes throughout the years. But yeah, it started in 64, and the bitch was indestructible, man. I mean, it really, and I always get questions like people, worried about like they're restoring a 65 race Hemi car.
Okay.
And they're freaking out because of the ball and trunnion flange in the back. I've never seen one broke.
Yeah.
I mean, they were a very strong setup, Not going to say it never happened, but I've never seen one broke, so.
Interesting. Let me ask you this. What was the most destroyed 833 that you've ever seen?
Whew. So a guy called me from, I think, upstate New York, and he had an original 68 Hemi Barracuda.
Oh.
Okay. Numbers car, like it was an original car, and he took it to the alignment shop. They just redid the car, and he took it to the alignment shop, and he dropped it off, and that night the guys took it out and figured they were going to do a burnout in it.
Oh, God.
But it was in reverse. It wasn't in first gear.
Oh, my God.
It grenaded it, man. Broke the case. Yeah, it wiped all the teeth off the slider, broke the case, broke the cluster. So, yeah, that was...
Wow.
That was the worst one. Yeah, that guy was upset.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I've gotten them, though, that, like, I've gotten a couple overdrives over the year, like the 23 spline truck overdrives.
Yeah.
That the input shaft was smoothed right over, like the teeth.
Really?
It looked like a rolling pin. They were gone, like just gone. I kept that input.
Wow.
So sometime in the future, if we ever do this again, I'll have to get my trophies out and I'll bring them and we can talk about them. But yeah, I've seen some crazy shit.
Oh yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, let's definitely do that.
I got smoked one time at the Mopar Nationals. I bought a core from a guy I know. Okay. And he didn't know. It was funny. Yeah. So I'm 18 splines. So I pulled the cover and, I was in a hurry. I looked inside. Not bad. I buy it. I get it back. At some point, I start tearing it down. I pull the bearing retainer off. Damn if somebody didn't cut an 18 spline input off and weld it to a 23 spline input.
Wow.
So with the bearing retainer on, it was 18 spline.
Oh,
they welded it underneath the retainer tube.
Wow.
So it was actually a 23 spline trans. And I was in a hurry. I should have been able to look right inside and see the gears, were not as coarse. But, I was in a hurry, and it was a guy I knew I kind of...
You wouldn't expect that, though, right?
Right. I called him back. I'm like, Corey. And... I could see the side cover was never off. He didn't know, but because I bought hundreds of cores from the guy over the years, and but that was probably the best one I ever saw as far as shenanigans. That was funny.
God, wow.
So
man, that's crazy. Let's I have a couple questions for you. We already answered one of them, but let's kick off this Q&A. We kind of talked about that one. So let's say modern Hemi swaps, and I know a lot of the hardcore Mopar guys are like, no modern Hemi stuff. Those aren't real Hemis. We're gonna play around for a little bit and talk about some modern Hemi swaps. Say I want to swap in a Gen 3 Hemi, but I'm a diehard 833 guy and I want to keep my 4-speed. What do I have to do to keep my original 4-speed on one of those engine swaps?
So you can use a stock small block bell housing from back in the day. So if you have a 70 Cuda that was just, say, a 340 car, pull the motor out or whatever, and you have that bell housing, you can use that. You just won't use the one bottom hole. The bolts, there's at the skirt of the block, there's 2 bolts that go through the block and thread into the bell housing. You won't use the one because the starter is in a slightly different spot. other than that, that bell works. You do need a special flywheel because the flange of the crankshaft where the flywheel attaches is a different distance to the back of the block. Okay. So you can't run a standard. I mean, obviously the bolt pattern's different anyway because it's a bolt and it's not Gen 2 Hemi bolt pattern, but that's what's required. It is a special flywheel, which we can provide. And other than that, you just run the old school 10.5 or 10.95, whatever, or 11-inch, depending on the car and the bell housing.
Right on.
Flywheel and it's actually a pretty easy swap. Then you do need to run the pilot bearing in the back of the crank, and you need to trim, I'm going to say, a good 1.5 inches off the input tip because the crank is not deep at all in the back of those. Like it might be 3/4 of an inch at the deepest part. So
who do I go to cut my input shaft?
Well, I mean, you can do it yourself.
Okay.
I mean, it's not hard. Just the best thing to do is get a buddy.
Yeah.
Put the trans in 4th gear. If you can get a slip yoke, that's good to have because you can have a constant rotation of the main shaft, which will turn the input because you're in 4th gear, and it'll turn it at a good rate,
Okay.
Excuse me. And then just you can get a cutoff wheel on a 4.5-inch bench grinder or a disc grinder.
Okay.
Cut it off, do your measuring and, trim it. And then that's where the rotation comes in. You can bevel the edge, so insertion into the pilot bearing is easier. But if we're building a trans for somebody and we know ahead of time, we'll face it off in a lathe and taper it so it's, nice. Yeah. But, I've had guys that, we'll build them a trans and then they're like, oh, I'm going to do this now. Can you, and we can tear it back apart. And we've done that. But, there's additional costs because we're, tearing it back apart. And, a lot of them are just like, trim it nice and it looks nice, because we do it, we take our time and do it right. It's not lathe nice, but it's it works fine.
That's kind of why I was asking you, like, is this something that I had to take to a machine shop to have done?
No, you don't. And, what we've done for people too is, if they don't know if they're crank, forget the modern Hemi stuff for this answer.
Okay.
Because they're always short. But, in the older engines, some cranks were drilled, some were not. So if they're not sure if their crank was drilled because they were drilled deeper and they were to a very specific diameter, hence the bushing. Mm-hmm. But some automatics weren't drilled deep enough, and you got to trim the tip of the input somewhere. I've done swaps on my own cars where every swap I've done on my own cars, they've been deep enough. But then we've done conversions in the shop, and they weren't for customers. So, I mean, I've taken inputs and cut them down, maybe cut 1 inch off, taper it, and then they run a pilot bearing in the back of the crank because then they're covered.
Okay.
If it's not deep enough, they're okay, and if it is deep enough, they're okay anyway because they're running the bearing, So we've done that for people too.
Awesome. Yeah, I like the modern Hemi swaps. I think they're really cool. But my buddy Blake, who owns Sublime Technologies, he's got a 70 AAR CUDA with a 5.7 Hemi in it, and it still has the 833 behind it. And it's just cool. I just think it's cool. It's not for everybody, but
it's very user friendly. You get in it, you turn the key, and it goes. There's not much carburation and what to worry about.
There is something to be said about the rumble of a big block Mopar. So I get that argument.
I don't think I could put a modern Hemi in one, but to each his own. I don't look down on people for doing it, but it's just not my bag.
For those of you watching and listening, Jamie and I had a conversation off live. The first meeting we had last week, and I told him that one of my dreams was to build a 68 Superstock clone, and everything be 68 Superstock clone with the exception of the modern Hemi. And you should have seen him cringe. It was funny. Nah. It was funny. Let's get into this chat here and see in the comments what questions we have. Here's one from Alex. He says he's got an 833 and a 67 Dart. He says the shifter's garbage. Does Passon make a replacement shifter with a factory appearance?
That's because that's a 67 Dart has an inland tool and machine shifter. They were it's like stirring a wok. So, yes, we what we generally do in your circumstance is a lot of people want to keep the inland handle. We actually make a Hurst mechanism, modify the tower, and it'll accept your inland handle from in the car. Nobody'd ever know. You don't need to pick up on the reverse, the little T handle there.
Yeah.
But if you want to fake it when you put it in reverse, you can. You don't need to.
Yeah.
But it keeps the appearance in the car. Your shifter linkage works the same. You don't even have to change linkage. You will need to change a mount plate, though. So you need a mount plate and a mechanism. Okay. So, yes, we can.
There you go, Alex.
Or we can rebuild your inland, and I prefer the Hurst, though. If you're driving that and you put a Hurst in it, like one of these prepped Hursts, you'll say you should have done it 20 years ago.
All right, Alex, hit up Jamie. Let's see what else we got here. Here's a nice comment. Terry Meyer says, hey, guys, thanks for having Jamie on the podcast. Chris, great products, and I'd love to meet him someday. You can meet Jamie at Carlisle.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Nice.
Yeah, we attend Carlisle and the Mopar Nationals, but just shout out to Carlisle quick. If you've never been there, go. Hands down, the best show in the country as far as I'm concerned. It's more than professionally run. It's insane how good they are to their vendors, to their spectators. They're great people, and they really know how to run a show.
Awesome. Yeah, it's on my bucket list. I'd love to make it this year. I'm not quite sure if I can yet, but if I can, I'll definitely be out there. That'll be a good time. I always hear such good things. So I'll definitely have to check that out. Thanks for the comment, Terry. And thanks to everybody else joining us tonight. I see your comments. Appreciate you guys hanging out with Jamie and I tonight. Sean Fat Tire Guy Thomas, he said, is the big bearing 23 spline any better than the small bearing?
That's another whole topic. Chrysler had to keep their engineers busy. So they started, I don't know how in-depth you want to get here, but I'll just quick and dirty.
Sure.
So this transmission was designed with a 307 bearing, a standard off-the-shelf 307 or 6307, same bearing. It was manufactured by MRC Corporation. That was the company Chrysler chose for the vendor. It was 825 thick, 0.825 inches thick. So that bearing was what was used front and rear, 64, 65, 66, 67. So 66 and 67. So the Hemi 4-speed came out 66 technically. It was like mid 65 actually, but 66 and 7 had 307 bearings. You never saw excessive failure. So in 68 they decided that the 18 spline was going to go up to a series 308 bearing. Same ID, bigger OD, same thickness. This is where you run into trouble. So this 6308 off the shelf bearing was 795 thick. Okay. So in order to get the bearing with the same ID as the 307, it was a 308 LOE. It was the wrong size bearing. So Chrysler had MRC make them an application specific bearing.
Okay.
So not a problem back in the day. Yeah. Fast forward, SKF Corporation buys MRC. SKF is actually a Swedish company. They buy MRC. They continue to make the 308 SG8 bearing. And up until probably 6-8 years ago, maybe, and then they stopped making it. I tried for 2 years to get them to at least make another run of a couple thousand bearings for us, and their tooling was wore out. They wouldn't do it, and they didn't sell enough to invest the money in new tooling. So I've built them both ways. I don't see that the 308 bearing isn't going to fail where the 307 would have.
Okay.
So you're not exceeding the load carrying capacity of the 307 bearing in these transmissions.
Okay.
So
right on. Thanks for the question, Sean. Appreciate it. Alex has another question. He said, is there a better oil to use in an 833?
Well, we make our own oil, actually. We formulated for it. I'm not trying to commercial sell it here, but we did a lot of work and came up with a good formulation. If you don't want to use that, I'm not saying you have to use that.
Sure.
But 80W90 is good to use. If you can find GL4, use GL4. It's hard to find. Back when GL5 first came out, it attacked the brass, so shifter forks and synchronizer rings. But I can tell you, I've personally probably torn apart 10,000 A-33s.
10,000.
Oh, yeah. 10 of them maybe had brass that was attacked. And what it does is it gets like green. It's like
Really?
it oxidizes it,
Oh, crazy.
but it's not a common thing. We've run GL5 in stuff for a number of years now, not had a problem. So,
Okay.
if you don't want to get ours, you can run 80W90 non-synthetic. If you can't find 8090, 75 is fine. But we try to stay away from synthetics because a couple reasons. Certain synchronizer rings that are available for these have bleed-off grooves. Depending on where you get them, some people don't. Ours generally do, but some other companies don't. So the synthetic is very slippery. So what actually happens is it's too slippery and a synchronizer can't do its job. So what I always tell people is, if you're running an over the road truck where you're putting 1 million miles a year on it or whatever, 500,000, that's where synthetics are useful. You're never going to put the mileage on these cars that you're going to recognize the benefit of the synthetic oil, at least in the trans.
Sure.
So, to me, it's not worth the risk. I would run either ours or 80W90.
And you can find Jamie's at PassonPerformance.com.
Yeah, you can have $150 in gear loop if you're putting synthetic in it.
Yeah.
Especially now because it's gotten insane. And then it grinds, and then you got to drain it out and put regular in, and then drain it out again because you got to dilute it, and so it's a costly mistake nowadays.
Okay.
So,
all right. Moving on, we got Dutch Guy's Garage, my friend Dustin. He says, what would you do to beef up the aluminum overdrives that came in the late 70s cars?
So, the way Chrysler designed this unit in order to keep the same package, that would be case configuration, tail configuration, what they did is they switched everything around so you actually run in third gear instead of fourth gear. Oh, some people think that's a huge deal. I don't think that's a problem at all. But in order to achieve what they needed to, they had to undercut the main shaft because the ID, in order to get a third gear small enough, they had to make the ID of the gear smaller, or else they would have no root diameter. Hell, the bore of the gear on a non-overdrive third gear is as big as the teeth of the gear on an overdrive, so that wasn't going to work. So they just skinnied up the main shaft and made a corresponding smaller ID 3/4 synchronizer hub. That's a strength problem because your shaft is maybe 2/3 of what it was, normally. But the other factor is they went to a floating countershaft. So on a regular A-33, the countershaft was a press fit. Mm-hmm. So it actually presses into you have to install it from the rear of the case, and it's a tight fit in the front. So when they went to the floating countershaft, it's actually a loose fit. It's a slip fit. And any kind of horsepower ovals that out. It hogs it out. That's why they needed an expansion plug to seal it, because the shaft was small in the bore. So what we do is we make a bushing to actually make the case a press fit countershaft. Admittedly, I don't sell the bushings anymore. If you want your case bushed, you can send it to us and we'll bush it. Okay. But what was happening was you have to bore the case. So the outside of the bushing is like, this is way exaggerated, but the outside of the bushing is like that, and the inside of the bushing is like that. So you actually have to taper the bore that you open up. Okay. So we were having people breaking cases when they're pressing it in.
Oh, shit.
And after 2 of them, I'm like, we'll just do it. So if you want your case bushed, so there's nothing you can do about the main shaft. That's just the way it is. But that's not a high failure area. I've never seen a main shaft broke there. You have more problems from the floating countershaft, because basically that allows the cluster gear, here's your main shaft gears, here's your cluster gear, that allows this. And anytime this is not lined up with that, that's where you run into problems. That's the biggest problem with a Muncie. You get such bad case flex. That's a large problem with them, because the cases just were not a robust setup.
Interesting.
So you don't get a lot of case flex with an A-833.
Okay. This is great. Learning about 4-speeds with Jamie Passon. This is fun. I enjoy this. Road Hard Restorations. Another buddy of mine. He says, my 74, I believe he's talking about his Duster. My 74 has an iron case A33 overdrive. Not sure how long they made them. The date code on it is 75.
So that should be an A body then, unless it's a truck.
I think it's an A. I think he's talking about a Duster.
Okay, so they made it. It's sketchy why they did this. Like 74 started the overdrives, but then 75 they actually made a non-overdrive A-body trans with a special 309 first gear, non-overdrive. It matched the 6-cylinder gear set from 64 and 65. I don't know why they did it, but they had a special bearing retainer, because by 75 all the bell housings went to the 5.125-inch hole. But this trans had a 307 bearing, so it's a 1-year only, very low production deal. And the bearing retainer is a 370 bolt circle, but it has a 5.125 OD. So they made the cast iron overdrive like 74, 5, and 6, and then 77 they knocked it down to a 25 spline out or 26 spline output and made it full aluminum. And then they went back to cast iron, and I've seen like A and F body. Excuse me. F body is the same trans configuration as an A body, but I've seen F body trannies that were cast iron tail, aluminum case, aluminum case, cast iron tail.
Okay.
So I think by that time they were kind of using up what they had, honestly. So never say never in that era. I've seen a lot of weird stuff.
Huh. Interesting. Harold says, Jamie, I talked to you a few weeks ago about your Hemi overdrive gear sets. Did any come in yet? Thanks, Harold.
They actually just came in this week. I went down to our gear company and got them. They are, so we will be starting to box all of them and get them out of here. If you weren't on our waiting list, you're not going to get one, because we sold out of them before we even had them in hand. Wow. We already have more on order, but we're probably looking at April, May delivery is what we're looking at. But
Harold, get on that second list.
Yeah, I already started the other list. So
okay,
but that's we have really good luck with these gear sets. They're made here in the States.
Cool.
U.S. origin steel. We always sell out of them. It's a nice option, if you don't want to, get crazy modifying your car.
Yeah.
So fits right in a stock A33 case, and they're 18 spline. That's why we call it a Hemi overdrive.
Yeah. Nice. All right. There you go, Harold. Get on that second list. Michael asks, what's the biggest mistake folks make in setting up a 4-speed for drag racing? Kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any biggest mistake. I would just say match your components. Like we have available some like 293 first gear sets. Okay. That's a nice option. They're expensive, but that's a nice option. Depending on your car, if you have a little bit of a heavier car, they get you stepped out a little quicker, and it's actually easier on parts. Definitely, if you're going to race it, I recommend going faceplated. That's a specific synchronizer design that it's actually non-synchronized. You can drive it on the street. if you pick up a copy of our book, not that I'm trying to sell you a book, but it shows pictures and whatnot in there. And I'll tell you what, I mean, that's what I have in my car. And that's, I never lift. I shifted $7 grand, and I never, ever, ever lift my right foot, and I never miss a gear. And I'm not saying I'm Ronnie Socks, but that setup really is a good setup. And you can drive it on the street, you can upshift, you can downshift. And usually when I when I build these for people, we'll synchronize first gear. So we'll use a stock first, put a brass ring in it. We'll put a dummy ring in second gear just as a key holder so that the synchronizer works properly. Second gear is not synchronized because it's face plated. Okay. But you can pull up to a light, push a clutch in, put it in first gear, no clunking, no banging, pull out, and then game on. It's but yeah, that's the best setup, hands down. You'll never go back and you'll say you should have did it years ago. So you can reach out to us. We're constantly doing setups. I have 4 right now in process for people. So
awesome. So yeah, if you're setting up a 4-speed for drag racing, reach out to Jamie. Road Hard Restorations has another question here. He's about to go through the 75 iron case overdrive A-33 to reseal it. Anything in particular that he should look for?
Some background. I'm not trying to dodge the question, but some background would help. High horsepower application,
sure.
Stock. Generally not if it's functioning properly, that it's not popping out of gear, it's not, hard to shift. I would check your strut keys, check your synchronizer strut key slots in your hubs, because a 75 OD is a late synchronizer design. There were benefits of that design, but there's also drawbacks. What happens is the keys were single carburized hardened. They were I shouldn't even say that. Let me back up. The gears were single carburized hardened, but the strut keys are actually powdered metal. They don't have the the same hardness as the earlier keys, so they wore a lot worse. Okay. So check that, and also the keys will actually wear a groove at the bottom of their slot, and what that'll do is that'll allow the key to drop, and then it'll get pocked up from the slider point hitting it, and you'll end up getting a pock mark there. And then it's just once it gets there, and the hub gets slots grooved in it, it's never going to shift right. Okay. So check that area, and obviously your synchronizer teeth. But if it's shifting okay, you're probably good, and that's going to have steel forks. So seal it up and.
Yeah, he says it's behind. He says it's behind a stock 318, and it's actively leaking from the shifter. So,
the gear selector shafts. It's the only thing I could think of, because the shifter wouldn't. That's not internal rail or anything. So,
well, Road Hard, if you have any, he says yes.
Okay. Yeah. So make sure you press your reverse shaft out so you can put a new O-ring on the reverse gear selector shaft coming through the case. A lot of people skip that step because it's kind of like, how am I going to get that out? But it's well worth it, because there's no way around taking the entire trans apart to do that. And especially with an overdrive, they're a pain in the ass compared to a non-overdrive. Okay. So
the Blight Factory clutch options for street. Is there a hydraulic setup for a clutch for an 833?
Yeah, we have a good hydraulic setup we use. We sell it. It's nice because it actually attaches to the firewall. It's a slave cylinder that attaches to the firewall where the pedal rod would go through.
Oh, okay.
So it's very non-invasive. Like there's other kits out there that you actually have to mount the master next to or underneath the brake master.
Okay.
You're drilling extra holes, this is a lot more user friendly. So what you do is your clutch pedal has the pin on it, looks like a nail head, where your pedal rod would attach to. Basically, you remove that, and there's a shoulder bolt that goes through your pedal to a push rod, and then that, goes to the Willwood master cylinder, which bolts to the firewall.
Oh, wow.
You can set up your angle because it's an adjustable bracket, and then you run your fitting from there to your hydraulic bearing. It's an active bearing. It's not a slave cylinder with a regular throwout bearing.
Okay.
It's an active wet bearing. And, you measure your setup and shim as necessary, according to the instructions, and it works well.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've had a lot of good luck. They're pricey, but they're, I'm a linkage guy. So, because linkage never leaks. Not that these are prone to leaking, but at the end of the day, anytime you got, anytime there's fluid involved, there's a chance of leak.
Sure.
So, but hydraulic is nice because you don't have to weld.
Yeah.
And if you have exhaust issues, you don't have to worry about it. It's so each design has its benefits,
Awesome. Right on. Well, there you go. This is a good, it's Sunday night. We don't want to keep Jamie here all night long. This is a great question to end on. Clifford asks, how do I contact Passon to buy a transmission?
Oh, God. Well, you can call me. You can Facebook message me. You can email me.
Right on the bottom of the screen is PassonPerformance.com.
Right. Or you can. So this is my wife's brother.
Oh, okay.
He's giving me a hard time.
Nice.
Well, I'm glad he's watching, so I can. Yeah. I'm sure I'll be getting hassled now. But yeah, that's. You can even text me if you'd like. So yeah, but all of the usuals.
That's awesome. My buddy Ruben from Muscle City Madness says, good stuff, great info. Thanks for this, Chris and Jamie. You're welcome. Thank you, Jamie, for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. I want to get you back. I want to see all the destruction that you've come across in your line of work. I want to see those parts you were talking about, your trophies.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's do this again, and I'm sure that people will have more questions. Hopefully, we've encouraged the world of Mopar to go out and go get some 833s and reach out to Passon, and let's get your shift together, people.
There it is.
All right.
Well, thanks for having me, and we'll talk in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for watching and joining us on this Sunday night. Remember, you can go to PassonPerformance.com for all the stuff that Jamie offers. And we'll see you next time. And remember, no Mopar left behind. Thanks for joining us. There you have it, my friends. Another episode of Talking Mopars is in the books. For everything you need to know about this show, you know where to go, TalkingMopars.com. And you can reach me by emailing Chris at TalkingMopars.com or by leaving me a voicemail on my voicemail box at 209-28-MOPAR, and you just might get to hear yourself on the show. So keep sharing those Mopar stories with me and anything else that is on your Mopar-addicted mind. Before we shut this podcast episode down, I want to give a special shout out to Passon Performance. For all of your Mopar 4-speed A-833 needs, visit PassonPerformance.com and let Jamie help you get your shift together. Also, special thanks to my friends at DIYHemi.com. For those of you that don't know, Blake has rebranded DIY Hemi, so although the website is still DIYHemi.com, DIY Hemi is now Sublime Technologies. So if you've been considering swapping a modern Gen 3 Hemi into your classic Mopar, then reach out to Sublime Technologies, get a hold of Blake, and tell them that I sent you. Blake has supported me from the beginning of this show, and I also support him in his mission to Hemi swap the world. Also, don't forget how important it is to keep your Mopar protected from the elements. If you need protection, don't wait. Head on over to TalkingMopars.com, click on the Affiliates tab, and go get your Mopar covered today. That's it, my friends. Until we talk again, I am your host, Chris Albrecht, and that was Talking Mopars.
Thank you for listening to Talking Mopars, your direct connection to all things Mopar. Until next time, remember, no Mopar left behind.